Chapter 3: Cosmic and Transcendent Consciousness. Yesterday, I started delving into cosmic consciousness by Dr. R. M. Buck. This is a very valuable work. It is an analysis of the states and experiences of certain men and women who have realized, in greater or lesser degree, a kind of mystical consciousness which places them at once on a different level from other men. The common characteristics of this individual and of their inward experiences, insofar as the word experience can be correctly employed in this connection, have been isolated by Dr. Buck. At the same time, the hardly less important differences have been noted. This study constitutes a real clarification of the problem of relationship between ordinary consciousness and the kind of consciousness commonly called mystical. Buck's self-consciousness is really equivalent to egoism, as this term is employed by Buddha and a number of other writers on the mystical subjects. It must be carefully distinguished from self-consciousness as when used to designate consciousness of the self, as in capital SELF. As a number of writers have employed this term in the latter sense, it has seemed to me less confusing to avoid Dr. Buck's uses, but to substitute such words as egoism, egoistic consciousness, subject-object consciousness, etc., and accordingly I will follow such a course. The self-consciousness of Dr. Buck is an advance beyond the simple consciousness of typical animal, but in its turn something of a barrier to cosmic consciousness. The latter term I find only partly satisfactory. This is a point that requires some elucidation. Recognition of the capital SELF, self, in its purity is realization of identity with absolute emptiness, darkness, and silence when viewed from the standpoint of relative consciousness. In point of fact, this emptiness is absolute fullness, but as such never can be comprehended from the perspective of egoistic consciousness. In one sense, it is the thing in itself of Kant. Relative consciousness deals with phenomenon alone and can never reach beyond phenomena. But phenomenal world rests upon the real or noumenal world. Thus, it is that consciousness of the capital SELF self, or pure apperceptive consciousness, sustains the whole universe or cosmos. But the latter is an outward projection. Behind the cosmos is the formless or transcendental world. Within the cosmos is the domain of relative consciousness. From the latter standpoint, the capital SELF self appears as formless. Hence the approach, for from the relative point of view it seems like an approach to the capital self from the consciousness posited within the cosmos, takes on the form of progressive negation of all identity with form until finally identity in the formless breaks forth as recognition. At this stage, recognition may well take the form of I am formlessness. But this really is an incomplete recognition, as Shankara has shown by his acute logic. The final recognition is I am not form and I am not formless. This standpoint is neutral with respect to the cosmos and truly transcendental or formless. What this really means is that beyond nirvana there is a paranirvana, which is a position of metaphysical indifference with respect to the states of manifestation or non-manifestation. At the same time, the individual soul may have a tendency or natural gravitation either toward the manifested or the non-manifested. Thus, Buddha, being drawn toward the non-manifested, was tempted not to put forth the effort to establish his message among men. On the other hand, Jesus, being drawn toward the manifested, faced the temptation in the form of worldly power. Both men conquered the temptation, but the form of temptation marks what really is the individual bent or tendency of the supremely great man. Thus, we may say that the sublimated consciousness of Jesus was predominantly cosmic consciousness, while that of Buddha was transcendental or noumenal consciousness. The common basis of both is identity in the self, in capital SELF. Dr. Berg does show a considerable understanding of cosmic consciousness, but seems to miss completely transcendental or noumenal consciousness. Hence, he largely fails to understand the significance of Buddha and gives to Walt Whitman a rather too exalted place. But doubtless, Dr. Book speaks with the natural bent in valuation characteristic of the West, and very likely the form of recognition proper to the West is more in accord with that of Whitman than that of Buddha. The very genus of the West seems to be foreign to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. For my own part, I cannot conceive of anyone who has glimpsed the beauty of the transcendent formlessness ever preferring cosmic beauty. He may choose to move in the world of form from a consideration of compassion, but not because of the integrity of the beauty of form as compared to that the other beauty. Today, I find that in a deep sense I understand Walt Whitman, for I too have awakened. But heretofore, Whitman was not at all clear to me, and his words have not helped me to awakening. In contrast, the writings of Sankara have proved of the highest potency, while among Western writers, it is Immanuel Kant who did most to prepare the way for me. This is clearly a matter related to individual temperament. Whitman's recognition is unquestionably genuine, but for me, his words did not clarify but served, rather, to obscure the way. Of Muhammad's expression, this would have been even truer had I tried to make serious use of it. Yet Muhammad did attain some degree of mystical insight. It seems clear that no man can effectively illumine the way for all men. There is more than one main road and a great number of sub-roads. On all these, men who can serve as beacons are needed.